Thank you for joining us today. I'm Urvi Juneja, chapter leader of Lean in India. Lean in India today partners with Sipping Thoughts and VW Business World to bring you a session on the expectations from a leader during crisis and how women leaders are best positioned to deal with it by our distinguished speaker, Apurva Purohit, president of the Jagran Group. Global crises such as the pandemic put extraordinary demands on leaders in a variety of ways. And as you're all aware, we have to make tough decisions from taking tough calls to getting our communication across and making sure the implementation goes right for them. Women in such crisis moments possess a lot of undefined, unrecognized characteristics which help them to shine in these crisis moments. Let's understand what these characteristics are, what these specific traits are, and how do they help us in crisis management. In this session with Apurva, we will explore all of this and beyond. Apurva, as you are aware, is a leading voice advocating gender diversity in the Indian business landscape. With this, I will hand over to Sukirti, co-founder Sipping Thoughts, to provide an introduction to our distinguished speaker and get the session started. Over to you, Sukirti.
Thank you, Urvi. But I'm so excited. It's always a pleasure to listen to such a dynamic leader. And I'm speaking from experience of having worked with her. She is one of the most passionate, logical, and inspirational business women around. She always leaves you in awe with some new insight or a new way of looking at things. Apurva, as Urvi has mentioned, is the president of the Jagran Group, one of the largest multimedia conglomerates in India. With over 3 decades of experience in the media and entertainment industry, she leads print, radio, digital, and outdoor in the group. She's a leading voice in advocating gender diversity in the Indian business landscape and has authored a national bestseller titled Lady, You're Not a Man, and you have to read this book because it's actually hilarious, and recently launched her second book, Lady, You're the Boss. Apurva has been a prominent speaker at multiple industry forums, marquee organizations, and educational institutions. She has won multiple awards and has repeatedly been featured as the most powerful business women in business list as per Fortune India and India Today Group. We're very, very excited to have her with us today. Back to you, Urvi, and to Apurva. Go ahead, Apurva.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Sukirti. Thank you, Urvi, for calling me here and getting me to speak to a bunch of dynamic women, though I can't see many of them. I'm sure everybody's there. And it is an absolute pleasure to spend an evening interacting with women. And I always look for such opportunities because these are moments where I get to actually tell women that, my God, you're so talented, you're so skilled, you're so smart. Then why is it that we still do not have more than 5% women at leadership roles in the country, despite 30 years of efforts being put in by organizations? Why don't we have more than 2% of funding going to women-led startups, despite the fact that there are so many of you with such incredible talent, energy, passion, and enthusiasm? So what is going right, and what can all of us, groups such as this, do to correct this imbalance? That actually is a passion of mine, and that's really what I want to talk to you about, because I think all of us need to co-opt each other in this entire journey of truly taking over 50% of the sky as we ought to. So, of course, the immediate conversation that all of us are doing is COVID, the reaction to COVID, what are the learnings that will emerge from this crisis, etc., etc. However, for 2 minutes, I want to focus also on 3 specific things that I think women do wrong. And I'm not talking about crisis. I think in life per se, they do 3 things wrong, and I want to sort of highlight it and use this occasion to sort of show a mirror to all of you that what are you and me, all of us, doing wrong, and how can we change that in our own behavior so that we truly take up, as I said, and own 50% of the sky. So what are the 3 things that are preventing talented, skilled, passionate, enthusiastic women from reaching the top of their entrepreneurship journey, from reaching the top of their leadership journey, from reaching becoming the best version of themselves. And these are the three critical behaviors I have seen play out in women who are 30 years old, 50 years old, 20 years old, women who are at senior management roles, women who are just starting off, women who are small-time business owners or owners of Fortune 500 companies. So the point that I want to make to you that however a woman looks from outside, however confident and bold and whatever you define as her success, that, oh, you know, she's a powerful woman or she's a successful woman, there are three traits which are sort of democratic across all women. Some women just manage to hide it better. But those are the three things that I want each one of you to change. So what are they? Okay. The first thing is this whole concept of imposter syndrome. I think many women, and so do men, of course, but many women suffer from this imposter which is sitting in their hearts, constantly telling them and nibbling away at their confidence, saying that you're not good enough. You came here by chance. Oh, you became a CEO because of luck. You got into a management institute because, you know, it was serendipity. I'm here to tell you there is nothing called luck. There is nothing called happy coincidence. There is nothing called serendipity. Wherever you have reached because of your hard work, because of your talent. You are a CEO somewhere, you are a CXO somewhere, you are a successful entrepreneur. That has only happened because you have worked hard, because you have had the skill and you have had the talent. Unfortunately, women allow that imposter to speak louder than their talents. And repeatedly, I see that this play out in every interaction with any woman. So I will have a male CEO working with me and I'll have a female CEO working with me. And the male CEO will always, you tell him that, so why did you do so well in this particular year? So he will turn around, I thought of this great strategy and then my team aligned behind me and I went and spoke to my client and my client said, wow, what a brilliant idea. So it'll be all about how whatever happened was because of him. When I talk to a woman CEO and ask her the same question, why do you think you did well this year? Her answer's invariably going to be, it was because of some luck and, my team supported me and it's just a coincidence. She will never accept that good things happen to her because of her and her skill and her talent and her hard work. And this different behavior plays out in any field, in any ecosystem. And the perception that constantly keeps on getting created is that the person who's watching you, the person who's evaluating you, the VC who's going to invest money in your fund sees you as not having confidence. Half the decisions people make are on how confidently you approach talking to them. And this lack of confidence comes out in many ways. Comes out in you sitting there and trying to attribute anything good that happened to your particular business to serendipity. You sitting there and saying that I actually don't deserve the promotion because my team did all the work, or God was kind to me, or my family supported me. These are the subconscious messages women put out all the time. And this is essentially because of that horrid imposter that is sitting in our hearts, which is telling us somewhere, oh, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And I think that's the battle we have to fight, not so much with the biases that we that operate on the outside in the environment around us, but within us. The second behavior that sort of stems in a way from this whole thing about this imposter is our constantly we are looking at our flaws instead of our strengths. So I remember when I was very, very young and I went for a wedding and I had a sty in my eye. And throughout 16 years old and throughout that entire wedding, I thought, my God, I have a star in my eye. Who will look at me? You know, at 16, you're very conscious of boys looking at you or not looking at you. Oh, I'm never going to get married. Look at that horrible star in my eye. But finally, that star was a little pimple. I have nice eyes. What about the rest of my face? Why did I concentrate so much on that one star? And you realize that women do it all the time. They come out of a presentation and you ask them, Sukirti, how was your presentation? Oh, I could have started better. And that third sentence that I said, and I faltered there. And you ask a guy, and how was your presentation? And it would have been a very, very average presentation. But oh my God, I killed it, boss. Yeah. So again, our flaws are so tiny. I mean, all of us have strengths and weaknesses, right? Our flaws will be 20% of our character traits, our personality. But we spend all our time looking at those flaws instead of the 80% strengths that we have, and maximizing ourselves. And in a way, why does that happen? And for that, I feel we have to ask ourselves this question today as mothers and sisters, and how are we bringing up our daughters? So we bring up our sons to maximize themselves. Talk loudly, Raja Beta, you can say this, you can do anything you want, you can be as rambunctious as you please. Nobody's going to say anything to you. The moment the girl is louder than she needs to be, more visible, don't talk loudly. Sit with your legs crossed. Don't open your mouth and laugh. Daant dikha ke hasti ho. All of us have teeth ना, दांत दिखा के हंसती हो, इतनी जोर से हंसती हो, इतनी औरत हो के इतनी बातें करती हो जोर जोर से. So we bring up our daughters to be lesser than what they are. So when they grow up and become women in workforces, in organizations, in businesses, how do we expect them to maximize themselves? Because they've been brought up to occupy a lesser place than they need to. Whereas we have brought up our sons to occupy more place. They have to be larger than life. They have to be louder than they need to be. Whereas our daughters have to be more invisible. To a large extent, we do this because we want to protect them. छोटे कपड़े मत पहनना, red lipstick मत लगाना, बाहर मत जाना रात को. Don't attract undue attention. We are doing this because we want to safeguard them. But in safeguarding our daughters, we are actually bonsaiing them. So how will they grow up to demand an equal share of the pie? Whether it is in the funding that they seek, whether it is in the promotion that they want, whether it is in celebrating their success, whether it is in saying that I did it because I am great. You're not supposed to praise yourself. That's not being nice. You can't say I'm great. Whereas our sons and our brothers and our husbands are constantly saying, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great. Till the world has started believing, yes, the male is great, the woman is not. And I think that is something that we need to change. The third behavior change. So I've talked about not concentrating on weaknesses, rather concentrating on your strengths. I've talked about not minimizing yourself, but maximizing yourself. And I've talked about the imposter syndrome, which was a third point that I made right in the beginning. And that imposter is something that you have to get up and throw out from your heart. How can you do that? So now let's move to what can we learn from this particular crisis to make this change? So I strongly believe that anything that happens in life is either a blessing or a lesson. Obviously, what's happened to us with COVID, this pandemic, this huge health scare is not a blessing. But certainly it can be a lesson for all of us, right? So what are the lessons we need to learn? How do we change something that has been taught to us from our childhood of being lesser than what we deserve to be? So I think 2-3, and I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think 2-3 things that will fundamentally change how women are perceived. But we have to make sure that people notice that. So what are those 2-3 things? first of all, let me reassure you that in a crisis, good things also happen. So if you look back at the different health crises that the world has been hit by, or even the World War. So 1347, when the plague happened, that was the time where the feudal system in England got decimated because there were no more laborers left to come and work on your farms. So the feudal system, which was an unequal system, got decimated. 1914, after the First World War, all the men had gone away to war. The women got a chance to start working in factories and farms. So the cause of working women got accelerated after the First World War. In 1918, after the Spanish flu, which again killed, I think, 30% of Europe, the European population, the European public health system started. So I think there are good things that emerge in the social structure when crises such as these happen. I mean, you all know about our own history and our own heritage, that when Manthan took place, poison also comes out, but in the end, Amrit did come out, no? That's why that Manthan happened. So in this Manthan, what are the good things that can happen? These are for women leaders, for women managers and women entrepreneurs. So I think the first thing that will happen, but again, the caveat here is that we have to push this change. So the first thing that is happening is increasingly as we work from home, right? What is happening is our spouses are also at home. We are also at home. All of you know this very well, that women, despite both men and women working, women pick up more of the housework. So apparently Indian men do some 2 hours of housework a week and women do some 77 hours of housework a week, right? So that there is already inequality in the housework despite both partners working. I think what's happening now is your husbands are watching you pick up that double load 24/7. Otherwise, they were sitting away at work. You were coming home, taking care of the tuition, taking care of the PTA, taking care of the housework, taking care of the cook, etc. You were managing all that. So by the time he came home at 8:30, oh my God, I'm so stressed. And then went and sat in front of the TV and the house was all ready for him, right? Today, whether because you don't have staff at home or because both of you are stuck and cooped inside, he's also watching you do that work, right? And hopefully he is helping. If not helping, at least he's realizing that the amount of housework that is required to keep the machinery of a family running. And I think that's if he's realizing and if he's seeing it, it is your job to ensure that he helps. Equally, it is your job to point out that this also is hard work, buddy. I was doing 70% of it earlier. Now, please, I'm also working. I've also become a hunter. So are you becoming the nurturer? So are we going to co-opt our families into supporting us? And no better time than now, because they are visibly seeing you pick up that load. No better time than now to retrain your husbands and your even your children to help you. Are you getting your children to help you lay the table, pick up the table, wash the dishes, fill water? I think getting families to support in the housework can go a long way in easing your load, B, in ensuring people understand the value of housework. Sometimes I often believe, I keep on saying that all women need to be financially independent, all women need to work, but equally there are a lot of women who are largely who are housewives or working from home. Are we giving enough credit to that housework they are doing? Will we ever move to a zone where we will say, okay, for that housework that you are doing, for taking care of the house while I'm going and earning a salary, you deserve 50% of my salary? Will we ever move to that? And that somewhere has to be that finally the family is a unit. A husband can go and work and maybe succeed a bit more in his career because he's putting in those hours, because the wife is picking up 90% of the home load. Does that not deserve a salary? Does that not deserve financial independence? I think those are the questions we should start asking ourselves. So I think that's one change. The second change is, how can you co-opt your families in your career? So I think one of the errors that women make is, of course, for the male spouse, the career is everything. When we come home, we sort of switch off from work, and then at home we are the mother, the wife, the house manager. We don't discuss our careers at home. So how does your family, your mother, your mother-in-law, your children understand how important your career is? And what do you do that is so important? Now that you're seeing you, now that they are seeing you do the same amount of work and the same amount stress levels that your husband is taking, can you encourage your family to understand what you do at work and how that is also important for fulfilling your potential, for ensuring that you feel that you've become the best version for yourself, for ensuring that you are being a productive citizen of the world? Can we show that part of our personality to our families so that they feel invested in our career? I'll tell you, one of the reasons my son has grown up to be such a feminist is because of, he tells me that how proud he is of my career, because I've always co-opted him. From the time he was young, he knew exactly what I used to do at work. So he is as invested in my career as I am. Can we do that now? The third thing is that for whatever reasons, largely bad reasons, of course, but the world is currently in a pause mode. The pause button has got pressed. When the pause button gets pressed, all the noise disappears from our life, right? All the extraneous noise, the noise of getting ready, what to wear, the traffic, the commute, the interference that happens at work, etc., etc. That noise has gone off. I know in the first 1 month, because I've been guilty of the same thing, just tried to fill it up because we couldn't handle this, right? So I just filled it up with 16 hours of work. I was doing more work at home than I was doing at office, right? Because you just felt, my God, and work was your only solace. Work was your only constant. So you held on to it with your life. And 10 o'clock, I would go and sit in front of my laptop and not get up till 7 o'clock and feel guilty even if I got up for lunch. Whereas I did maybe 70% of the same amount when I went to office. Just the thing of going to office was work itself, right? So life, but that month has passed. We are going to live through another month, maybe another 45 days of this pause mode. In this time, what I want you all to do is to sort of get in touch with yourself. So I'll give you an example. So I suffer from, menopause, etc., happened. So as one consequence of menopause was insomnia. And in this, I tried everything: acupressure, aromatherapy, melatonin, meditation, yoga, everything to handle insomnia. Couldn't figure out what to do. It's only now, 5 years I've been having insomnia. It's only now when I sort of got the time to talk to my own body and figure out what do I need to do in the evening or towards the night that helps me sleep better. And it's my body. I should know. But we are so caught up in the external noise. I mean, ask yourself when you go to your doctor and you say, if he asks you, so what are your symptoms? You actually can't describe your symptoms very well. My body ache ho rahi hai. But where is it paining? Then it takes you like 5 minutes to figure out where is it paining. Because we are not in touch with ourselves. We are so caught up in taking care of our families, taking care of our work, and all the extraneous noise that completely we have lost touch with who we are, not only as individuals, but with our physical self. It is only now I figured out what are the 2-3 things that I eat which help me sleep better. What are the 2-3 routines that help me sleep or mar my sleep after 5 years in this 1 month. So I think that is a very valuable tip that I'm leaving. Spend time with yourself. Don't fill that time with needless chores, cleaning out cupboards, and okay, since I'm sitting at home, I may as well get all the fans repaired. Or since I'm sitting at home, let me get my clothes aligned by color and by Pantone shades. Don't do that. Spend that time trying to get in touch with yourself. What did you? I'm not going to give you those Twitter comments that they rediscover your hobby, rediscover your interest, because 3/4 of us are doing jhadu pocha. Where will we rediscover our hobbies and our interests? So I'm not going to tell you that, but I'm definitely going to say whatever time you have, please get in touch with your bodies first. We all know health is the most important thing through this crisis. Your health, the health of your family has become even more important, even more urgent. So use this time to rediscover how to be a healthy you. Yeah, through good food habits, good sleeping habits, good whatever exercise, etc. works for you. I want to end this and then we'll open it out for question answers with why I strongly believe, and so should you, that the coming years are years where women leaders are going to shine. And this is nothing with respect to just the crisis. It is per se the changes that we are seeing in the world. So the last 10 years, the last decade has been the decade of the muscular leader, right? So I am Trump, I am Modi, I am the greatest, I am, right? I think what this crisis will show is that muscular leaders did not have all the answers. They could not have. No leader can have all the answers. No individual can have answers to anything, whether running a business or whether running a country. To be a good leader, you need to have diverse opinions around you. To be a good leader, you have to listen more than you speak. To be a good leader, you have to have people brighter than yourselves around you, which none of our muscular leaders bothered to do, which is why they are struggling. And it is very obvious, whether it is Boris, whether it is Trump, whether it is Modi, that they are struggling. Equally, the leaders who are not struggling are the women leaders, the New Zealand Prime Minister, Angela Merkel, etc., etc. Why? Primarily for 2 reasons. One, they have ensured that they have heard different voices. 2, they have ensured that they have not been, I can solve this, let this COVID come, I will kill it. That's what they started with now. That Boris also started with that. Modi also started. Trump, of course, started with that. They didn't say that. They were cautious. They were a little more defensive. They were a little more real. They were more pragmatic, which is what women leaders are. Because we don't run, there's the whole concept of ROE. Male leaders run it on return on ego. I should have the biggest business. I should have the largest number of radio networks. I should have the largest number of page views. Sometimes it's not about largest, right? Sometimes it's about efficiency, productivity, return on investment, bottom line, cautious pragmatism. And I keep on saying, I remember when Barack Obama had won the elections, just after that, somebody had said about him that, winning an election is poetry, running a country is prose. And I feel that is so true about whether you're running a business or running a country. You win elections by all this great, I'm so great. But you run countries and you run businesses, it's like a plumber's job. Choti cheeze, detailing, getting the pipes working. And I think women do that far better. And I think the third thing women do far better than men is communication. So they say, there's this Mayfield research which a lot of people are talking about, which talks about 3 things that are required for good communication for a leader. One is it direction giving? Two is it meaning making? And three, is it simple and clear? Direction giving is something that male leaders do very, very well. I think stay at home. Lockdown is implemented. But meaning making, no male leader is able to do. How do you give meaning? Why am I asking you to stay at home? For A, B, C reasons. I think in the Western world, people would have implemented it far better if, apart from direction giving, there was also meaning making. How do we in our communication give meaning to what we are saying? And that comes only out of empathy, right? Today, you understand your teams are suffering from great anxiety, but at the same time, you want them to come back to work. But if you discount the anxiety and just say, I'm telling you, so come back to work, they're going to suffer from a lot of fear. But if you're able to say, I understand your anxiety, I understand that you're worried about the health of your family and yourself. However, if we don't get the economic engine chugging, there will be far more distress. So I will do whatever I can to help you protect yourself and your family. And you then ensure that you come to office with the fearless mind. But our male leaders will not say like that. They will say, I told you, get back to work. The empathy and the meaning making only women leaders can do. And I'll tell you, the new generation, the millennials, Gen Z now, appreciate collaboration, appreciate that their opinions are asked for, appreciate diversity, and appreciate when you show empathy in your communication. These four things only a woman leader can do. So good leadership is gender agnostic. So I've seen equally good male leaders. However, these four skills come natively to a woman leader. And these are the four skills you need to capitalize on, along with changing the 2-3 behaviors that I talked about earlier. So carpe diem is an oft used phrase, but this is the time to seize the moment for women leaders such as yourselves. And I genuinely hope all of you will do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Apurva. We have a set of questions. So one by one, the people who have asked questions, I'm going to unmute them and they can go ahead and ask them up. So first question, Maybelline, you want to go ahead and ask that question?
Yep. First of all, thank you for explaining it clearly. Those 3 main points definitely is repeatable. It echoes around the world. I'm in the United States. I grew up in many countries. But from my experience, most of my blockers are women. They were the worst bosses that I've ever had, right? Despite men being the way they are, I work in a man environment, right? I'm an engineer, consultant, and my best bosses were men, unfortunately. They're actually very open to my suggestions, right? And like you stated, as long as you're brave and you speak up and you explain in a manner where they actually want to accept the message, I've learned humor is the best way to do it. We're too serious, I think. Women are way too serious. They take it too personally. That does not work well. We have to be goofy. We've got to be silly. If you have to be cute, that's fine. But how do you expect women to rise up when your main HR, human resources, we have a C-level HR that you would think would be motivated to support women to have succession in the C-levels or even the higher level management, and they're not creative enough, right? Many people in human resources are women, and yet they know this is going on. They have the statistics. They see the salaries that we're making. They see the levels. They're seeing the long history of women not getting elevated, and they do nothing, right? And it's the same for school districts. Many women are teachers. Principals are men. If you go to a hospital, many women are nurses, and the leaderships are men. How do you motivate women from, like some people have mentioned, old school mentality to say, you know what, I deserve to be a leader myself? And then how are they supposed to set a standard for daughters or even sons like you have with your son when they only talk, but they don't take the action?
So I think you've said many things in in the points that you have raised. So I think that you're making two separate points. One point is that you haven't seen too many women supporting other women. The second point is specific to HR, that you haven't seen HR be creative enough. And I think the third point is that if you see male leaders across the world, how do women get motivated to rise above that? I'll take the third question first. So this point that there are obviously 95% of leaders around the world in whether it's in hospitals, whether it is in organizations, whether it is in countries, are male. So how does a woman feel emboldened to succeed? And here is where I think all of us need to do our job, which is stay visible role models. There are so many women who have reached senior positions, but then do not want to be seen as a woman leader. Her answer is that, when I tell my own friends that come and be more visible in these kind of forums, they'll say, no, I reached here because of just being a great professional. I don't want to be seen as a woman leader, which I think is very wrong, because that young women feel empowered and emboldened when they see women role models around them. So when people ask me, for example, in my own organization, what are the specific things I did to encourage women? I did nothing except ensure that 50% of my CXOs were women. Only when they see women leaders do younger women feel emboldened. So it is our job, our duty to be more visible. That's my answer to your third question. As far as HR is concerned, I completely agree with you that I have rarely found anybody in HR who has the ability to be creative and think out of the box and think they have grown up in specific models and ecosystems of behavior, and they keep on replicating it. Whether it is in training, whether it is in promotions, whether it is in selection, they are still operating from models which were built in the 1990s. So as I say, you can't rely on HR to do anything. We senior leaders have to be our own HR managers. The most difficult question to answer is the question that you started off with, which is on saying that women don't support other women. I'll tell you that I would have spoken at least 5,000 such forums as today's, and in 4,999 of them, this question gets asked. So obviously it is a reality. Obviously women have suffered at the hands of other women. I'll tell you personally, I have always had very supportive women bosses. So I have not had that example, and I keep on saying that to people that I haven't had that. And if you look around, you will find, so for that one woman who's not been so great, you'll find 9 other women who have been quietly supportive of you. We just have to look for those sisterhood of support. Having said that, I'll also explain why this question gets asked and why we believe that senior women have not been supportive of junior women. There are 2 reasons. Reason 1 is that, remember when they grew up, when they, like for example, the generation before us grew up, they were the only woman in the room. They had to be man-like to reach where they did. They were the ones who shattered the glass ceiling. We've had it so much easier. So they've had to be far more aggressive, far more ruthless. And at that time, there was a lot of tokenism. So there was only one job for a woman. So you had to fight with the other women to reach that position, right? So I think that's the earlier generation. Our generation has had it far easier. It is up to us now to support women below us. Okay. And the second reason why you don't find support and why you believe that senior women don't support is we expect, and there's research which says that we expect women managers to be softer, because we expect them to say, oh, she should understand what I'm going through, right? But when she's not and she's tough, we say that she's nasty. You understand? So that and this is research. Women juniors expect women managers to be easier on them. And when they are not, the reaction is, I've never had support. But the fact is that, for example, I don't give extraordinary support to my women, except for the first 2 years when they've had babies. After that, I don't, because I want them to not get bonsaied. I give them the tough projects, I give them the tough roles, I give them the tough jobs, because that's the only way they will grow up to be equal.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I know I'm sure these questions have come up often and I just brought it up, but my solution, like I said earlier, has been humor. I'm definitely not easy. Rashmeet knows. I'm a straight, direct person. I'm easily confused as another 6 feet tall person, even though I'm 5'1". So I definitely have a presence, and I definitely purposely dominate for a reason because of that, right? And the only way I've seen being able to inspire people is literally put the foot in the door, put my head right there, stick my foot in the elevator, and interrupt a lot of people. I'm usually the one that sneaks in the conversation and like, who are you? I'm the only woman in the room typically, but when I'm in there, I'm taking full advantage of getting their attention. So I'm just saying, I echo what you said. We need to stop hiding behind the scenes. Show your face, show your brand, have fun with it. And God, stop being so perfectionist. It gets old. Have some fun. Thank you.
So obviously you deserve the Wonder Woman tag that I see hanging behind you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mabel, and thank you, Apurva, for answering that. We have another question from Reena. If you can go ahead and ask your question. I could ask that question for her.
Hi, it's Athena Shankar. I just want to make sure I'm being around. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my question. So considering the fact that I'm a typical Indian woman and therefore I'm married to a typical Indian man, my question is, how do we actually change that generation-old mindset that the men have been brought up with, saying that women are the ones who are the primary child care and home care managers? Despite the fact that you run your own enterprise, despite the fact that you are also a working woman, how does one change that?
So, as I said, one is that you have to co-opt. You have to co-opt your family in your career. You have to constantly have these conversations, the collaborative conversations with your family, that your career is as important. And only when they start believing the importance of your career for yourself, change will come. The second thing is that change will not come only by talking. Change will come by doing, by showcasing. Unfortunately, the generation that we are married to have been brought up by non-working mothers, right? With that whole thing of Raja Beta and I'll take care of you. Your job is to go out and earn, and the wife's job is to stay at home. So that paradigm shift will translate into action only a generation later. So we may not be able to change the generation that we are dealing with, but we can certainly change the next generation, our sons and our brothers and our daughters, by expecting our sons to treat their sisters and their girlfriends and wives as equals, by co-opting them. So how many of us are using this time to teach our sons? How many of our sons know how to cook? How many of our sons are expected to fold their clothes and keep them back? How many of our sons are being taught to use a washing machine? I think if you treat them equally and expect them to take, and not in the traditional, okay, you do the accounting and you will do the cleaning, can we get at home our sons to do the jobs that traditionally were supposed to be done by women? That's the only way the change will come. And if they see you working, I always say that when we see half the women who start their careers leave within the first 10 years, they are doing a big disservice to the next generation. Because they stop working, that becomes the expectation of the generation that comes after them. That the woman will stay at home and take care of the housework.
Thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you so much, Reena, for that question. We have another question from Shalini now. But before we proceed, Shalini, just give a one-line introduction of yourself, just to set the context.
Sure, thank you, Rashmeet. My name is Shalini Singh, and I work with HSBC, and I lead the HR team there. So thank you so much, Apurva. It's fantastic to hear your thoughts. It's just that the last the second last question that you would have answered on HR working from a mindset, well, I would beg to differ there. It's not that, it's actually those organizations, and it could be a different aspect how you deal with it. Having said that, I think I've been following you very closely on the book that you released and on the beautiful videos on WhatsApp that's done the circulation. Can you just talk about that a little bit and highlights on the book? I'll be very keen to get that for me and my team. So if we just summarize some bit and talk about it. Thanks.
Yeah. So no offense meant on that HR point, but I have great respect for HR, and I've always believed that HR is the true partner to a CEO, right? Unfortunately, the people who can think out of the box in HR, I find that to be an exception. Especially when you want to give them that partnership role. So I'm sure you are doing a great job. I'm sure there are many HR leads who are doing a great job, but I just would urge anybody who's in HR and who's listening to this to look at things not from a model perspective, the old training, the old ways of working, but reinvent and come up with newer and fresher ideas. And again, this crisis is going to be yet another time where HR can come out with a new playbook of dealing with a new style of working. And I'm really looking forward to HR teams doing that. On the book and some of the tips, I think I've talked a lot about it, but I will just... So I wrote 2 books. The first book, Lady You're Not a Man, I wrote for younger women who had just started off on their career, the first 10 years where they're trying to balance so many things. And 2-3 points that repeatedly kept coming. One was the guilt that young mothers feel when they have to leave their kids at home. And, many women drop off from the workforce because they can't deal with that guilt. And I keep on telling them that whatever you do, you'll feel guilty. Even if you are staying at home, you'll feel guilty about having sacrificed your career or not being able to give your children the kind of, benefits, so to speak, a double income can give. So guilt is something that women will constantly feel. We just need to learn how to deal with it better. So I touched upon guilt. I touched upon, as Maybelline has said, the whole book has been written very humorously because I think, as she said very rightly, we take ourselves too seriously. So there are chapters on training husbands. There are chapters on this whole concept of the TLT male, which is the Taulia Lau type male, and how we have brought up a whole generation. Our mothers have brought up a whole generation of the Taulia Lau, so that, I say that, you've been having a bath for the last 30 years. Why can't you carry your towel to the bathroom yourself? Why should the wife be the Taulia carrier for you? So that was the first book. The second book has been written for slightly senior women leaders at the middle management and senior management level, because I recognize that even at this level, there are certain challenges. And those are the challenges I spoke about, this whole thing, the imposter syndrome, this lack of confidence, the unwillingness to celebrate your success. And I think that's also some learnings that women have to go through. And finally, the point that I make throughout my books, throughout my sessions, is that you are the heroine of your own story. You can choose to be the victim and always cry and be the suffering Sita. Oh my God, I have so many problems. Or you can say, no, I am and if the moment you are the heroine, you take control of your narrative. Your husband doesn't control it, your mother doesn't control it, your mother-in-law doesn't control it. You control your narrative.
Perfect. Thank you so much for those thoughts. We'd get in touch with you shortly to having you come over. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Shalini. And I have to say this, Apurva, I'm getting personal notes and feedback, people saying, she's so quirky. I love so we love your style and we love having you here. Just wanted to say that. And next we have a question from Anushri.
Hi, good evening, Apurva ma'am, and thanks for the wonderful session. I'm audible?
Yes, Anushri.
Yeah, I've read both your books and I really want to say it has been transformational for me, at least both in my professional and personal life. So thanks for the great insights that you have thrown for us. My question is, in this current environment that we are in post-COVID, I believe because all of us are working from home, for some of the managers in terms of managing their teams, micromanagement has increased and it's kind of affecting female morale a little more because I mean, they are like perceived to be working more for home than working at home. So all that perceptions and all, any perspective around that or any suggestions you would like to throw on how to manage such bosses or such management?
Very good question. So I want to make up one point here. So, why, as Anushri is saying, that why are managers trying to micromanage women a little more? Because they are coming from this trust issue that, oh, she's at home, she's obviously doing far more housework than she's actually doing office work. So I need to micromanage her more. I'll tell you why this happens. And this is again another point that I repeatedly make. I see a lot of women at work when they are in office, they're actually sitting and spending lots of time discussing family issues. So you go to the canteen. You go to the canteen in your office. The guy is discussing the economy and the GDP and what, etc., etc. The woman is talking about, I have to go for the PTA meeting. I have to do this. So this whole concept, I keep on saying, women operate from of absent while being present. So they are physically in office. But mentally they are thinking about home. And this reflects in so many of their other behaviors. For example, when I ask them to volunteer for projects which may require working on a weekend, the men will all put up their hands because they know that project is a transition to the next role. The woman will say, shit, if I put up my hand, she'll expect me to work on the weekend. Oh, this weekend I have Satyanarayan Katha to do. Oh, this weekend I have got my sister-in-law coming for food, for lunch. I have to take care of her. So they don't volunteer. Because in their mind, while they are working, home and home management is equally, if not more important. Whereas your male colleague is spending 24/7 thinking about his work and his career. You're not doing the same. So therefore, when the promotions come and the next roles come, they naturally go to men, because the subconscious message, the subconscious perception, even a woman leader will have, is that, my girls are not as, ambitious, career conscious, driven as my males. Not because they're not hardworking, not because they're not talented, not because they're not skilled. You see how much time you spend talking about home and housework when you are at work itself. So naturally, when you are at home, he's thinking, "Ke to Satyanarayan Katha hi kar rahi hoegi." है ना? So that is why they manage you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Apurva, for saying that. Is it okay to take up one more question? Are you comfortable with it?
Yeah, please. I'm here.
Okay, sure. So next question we have by Namita. And ladies, if I forget to ask, don't forget to introduce yourself quickly. So Namita, you can go ahead now and ask your question. If not, I could ask a question for you. Okay, so Namita's question is, micromanagement has also increased post-COVID since the trust is less for some managers, and that has affected female employees more since perception is that they are working for home rather than from home. So any suggestions on those front?
So as I said right in the beginning, when we suffer from a lack of confidence, when we don't want to stand up and celebrate our own success, when we don't want to talk about ourselves, one manifestation also is that we never talk about the work we do. We say our work will speak for itself. But I assure you, work is dumb. It doesn't speak for itself. You have to speak for yourself. You see your male colleagues during evaluations, during the appraisals. I did this, I did this, I did this. He will keep on reminding the boss of the 10 things he did. The woman will say, oh, he should remember, I slog. The boss should remember. Bosses don't remember. So do you sit, again, COVID or non-COVID, do you sit and discuss with your bosses during appraisal time, these are the 7 good things I did? You don't do that. So that is a behavior that you have to change. You have to talk about your hard work, your successes, the good things that you did. Even more so now in this situation when he can't even see you. So are you, for example, with the manager who's micromanaging you, are you saying, okay, this week, these are the 10 things I'm planning to do. Send it to him. Then a day later, by the way, just sharing with you, I closed this particular deal. By the way, I've finished this task. You will not do that because you say, no, he should understand, he should know, he should trust me. Nobody trusts blindly. It is your job to make them trust you, and in these situations when you are more invisible, to keep on showcasing. So that behavior change you have to bring. And this, again, I want to stress that while as I said, crisis fundamentally change ecosystems and social structures, I also believe crisis don't change human beings. We are too stubborn. We are dheet people. We will not change. But crisis brings out so mean people become meaner, generous people become more generous. So it just highlights your characteristics that already exist. Now imagine if the characteristics of women generally are not talking about themselves, not celebrating their successes, imposter syndrome. These will be getting further highlighted now, no? Who will change it? Only you can change it by talking more about yourself.
Thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense. I think you can see the action in the chat box with people agreeing and totally calling you witty and so on point. If we have a lot more questions. Just to say, we have like more than 5-6 questions. Just tell me how many you want to take up at the moment, because we know that we have crossed the time. Whatever is
Is it? I mean, are there some questions which we can summarize? Are there some similar questions? Then I can take it up at one go. Or if you just read out the 4-5 questions, I'll try and cover it in.
Okay, so we have one question around where Stuti is asking, I have a startup where my customer base is manufacturing companies. The conversation and questions are quickly directed to my partner via mail. Sometimes she's able to break this conversation, but it's around how to mold that conversation further. How do we go about changing the course and the thought process that's already there? And then it's about women making small groups at the workplace and being in their own groups and not, going on and having conversations. Even if being in that group is non-relatable, they go ahead and do that. There's one question. And then there's one about saying that a lady is not able to talk fun at work. She is like of serious nature. How do you change that conversation? So these are some 3 distinct questions that you can take up at the moment.
So I think the first question, more or less, I answered that the changes are going to happen over a period of time, and the only way we can make changes is by changing ourselves. Change comes from within. If we sit back and say, society will one day change, generation will change, then only women will come. That's not. We have to push that change. We have to be, and I keep on saying, we have to be more visible, louder, more vocal, more in your face, wherever you are, whether in your social gathering or in your organization, for change to happen. That's and then ourselves are taking, the fact that our career is as important as our family life. It's not either or. I think often in our minds, it's an option. So either I'll do well at work or I will do well at home. I can't do both, but you can do both. I mean, nobody asks a man, that, okay, so I believe you're getting married. Will you work after that or no? Why do all the women get asked this question? Because 90% of the women are stopping working after a marriage. So this or thing has to go away from our mind. 30 years of our career, 40 years of our career, only 2 years you should be concentrating on your family when your kids are small, etc. 38 years of your life, career should be priority 1, because that's what it is from our male colleagues. I think that's how change will come. The other bit, what was it? Please tell me the.
There are just 2 bits. One about being in small groups of just women at work, and then being fun.
Yeah. So see, the ecosystem is designed for men. networking options are designed for men. So after office, you go out for a drink to the club, or on Sundays, you go and play golf. Our world is designed for men. Okay. So what do? We want to rush back home because we don't want to go drinking because we have to take care of the homework and the housework, right? So networking solutions that are currently existing in the corporate world are not designed for women. So we have to create our own networking solutions. There is no harm in women forming groups and forming, whether it is lean-in groups, whether it is groups in organizations, whether it is support of 10 women friends, there is no harm. Again, it is sort of looked down upon. Acha, to kitty party shuru kar di hai inhone office mein. So doesn't matter. Let it be called a kitty party, but you will get the maximum support from women colleagues. There is no harm forming these kind of groups at work. Okay, men do it all the time. Does anybody say, oh, they've gone for kitty party? Nobody says that, right? So you need to get a support group around you if you want to succeed. And fun, of course, as Maybelline said, that humor is a great tool to manage any situation. I mean, just now, my son was on a panel discussion in his own organization, and he was talking about how, all the male partners in the organization are posting photographs of what they have cooked at home, right? And everybody's clapping and lauding them and saying, oh, you did this, well done, well done, well done. So he sort of, in a very humorous manner, he said, this is like a non-working person posting pictures of a pivot table from Excel and saying, oh, I created this pivot table. So it's almost equal to that. Don't cooking is something that you all have to do, right? It's nothing that is so special. It's just for the housewife, it is just like making a pivot table in Excel. So but that point hit home, right? When we see all this vanity posting of I baked this and I cooked this happening. Women have to do it 24/7.
Absolutely. I love how you have put that out. We still have a lot more questions, but I think I'll hand over to Urvi now. Thank you so much, Apurva, and thank you so much. We're sorry we could not take up all questions at the moment.
Thanks, Rashmi, and thanks, Apurva, for such an enlightening session. Found it extremely fruitful and constructive. I want to let you know that your message on getting in touch with yourself and spending time with yourself has definitely touched the chord somewhere. So it's definitely, I'll take that forward. And from here on, I'll hand over to Noor from Business World for thank you. So over to you, Noor.
Hi, thank you, Urvi. Thank you so much. I have to thank Ms. Purohit. Every time I listen to her, I go back with the spirit to change the world, and this time was not very different. My role is very simple today. I just need to do a quick vote of thanks. I know we've already overshot time, so I'll keep it simple. First of all, thank you, Urvi, to you, to Lean In. I would like to thank Sukirti as well, and to Sipping Thoughts. Very, very important thanks to Ms. Apurva Purohit for her time. We know that she's probably working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. right now. Probably working more than regular everybody is. And for those awesome thoughts, I was seeing the chats, and I think there was either agreement, disagreement, but everybody had a point of view in it. It's very intrinsic to the way she gathers feedback from people. Thank you, all of you, for your time, and all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to see faces who I had lost touch with, Noor and Sukirti, and thank you for inviting me. I hope it was useful. And please stay in touch.
Take care, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Thank you so much.